What if I told you that back in the 18th century, adding life-saving doctors to British ships actually resulted in people getting murdered?
I mean, it sounds completely counterintuitive.
Right. But then changing just one single line in a payment contract saved thousands of lives almost overnight.
Yeah, and it is honestly the ultimate proof that, when human beings are doing the wrong thing, just appealing to their better angels is, well, it's almost always a complete waste of time.
And I think we have all been there, right? Like you are watching a coworker constantly cut corners at the office.
Oh, or a friend who just keeps making, like, the exact same terrible relationship choices over and over.
Exactly. You sit there and you think, if I just sit them down and explain the morality of the situation, if I just logic it out for them, they will change.
But they never do.
No, they never do. And you are just left there completely frustrated, pulling your hair out.
Well, because we assume the problem is the person's character, right? Like, we focus entirely on their internal moral compass. But in doing that, we completely ignore the external environment. We ignore the actual incentives they're operating under.
Which is exactly why we are going on this deep dive today. So welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Today we are looking at this deeply fascinating framework from an essay written in June 2022. It's by an author named Feng, and it's titled, "Instead of Moral Preaching, Change the Program."
It's a really brilliant mental model, honestly.
It really is. It takes that exact frustration you feel and completely flips it on its head.
Yeah, the core argument takes this very pragmatic, almost cold-blooded economic concept, and then it attempts to scale it up, like to address literally every form of human suffering imaginable.
And when we say scale it up, we mean all the way up. The mission for today's deep dive is to start with this incredibly concrete historical lesson on behavioral economics.
Right, that 18th century ship example.
Exactly. And then we are going to follow the author's logic as it takes a wildly unexpected turn into a radical utopian vision. And this is proposed by a group called Lifechanyuan.
The pivot from, historical pragmatism to massive utopian societal restructuring is quite the journey.
It is a massive leap. And before we get into it, I want to be incredibly clear with you, the listener. The ideas, the societal structures, the spiritual concepts we are going to explore today, they are highly unconventional.
Highly provocative, too.
Yes, deeply provocative. And we are not endorsing any of this. We're absolutely not taking sides on any of the political, societal, or religious viewpoints presented in this source text.
We're just looking at the machinery of the text.
Exactly. Our goal today is simply to impartially unpack the architecture of these arguments exactly as the author laid them out, just so you can understand the sheer scale and, the underlying logic of what is actually being proposed.
Precisely. We are examining how a philosophy is constructed.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the historical example used to set up this entire philosophy is just a masterclass in human incentives.
It really is.
So it's the 18th century, and England has a massive problem with overflowing prisons. Like, they are just packed.
Right, and their solution is penal transportation. They decide to just ship these convicts halfway across the world to Australia.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. The goal is twofold, really. First, alleviate the domestic overcrowding in the British prisons, and second, develop the newly claimed land down in Australia.
Right.
But, and here is the kicker, rather than using the Royal Navy to transport everyone, the British government decides to outsource it.
It's classic.
Yeah, they hire these private merchant ship captains to transport the prisoners.
And here's the single variable that sets up the whole disaster. The initial program, or the contract, stipulated that the government paid these private ship captains based on the number of convicts they boarded onto the ships back in England.
Right, boarded. And if we look at the immediate incentive structure there, it is just an absolute nightmare.
Oh, it's terrible.
If you are a private ship captain and your payday is locked in the exact moment a prisoner sets foot on your deck in London,
You don't care what happens next.
exactly. Your only logical, profit-driven move is to cram as many human beings into the hole as physically possible.
Because the survival of those prisoners is suddenly, well, it's a complete non-factor. And the statistics from the text are horrifying. These captains just packed the holds, the air quality was toxic, disease ran rampant, and the death rate on these voyages hovered around a staggering 12%.
12% is huge for a voyage like that.
It is. There is a specific brutal example given in the essay. One ship boarded 424 convicts, and 158 of them died before ever seeing Australia.
That's just tragic. But from a purely cynical economic standpoint, the captains really did not care. I mean, they had already cashed the check.
Right, so the British government looks at this 12% death rate, and they react exactly the way most of us do when we see bad behavior.
They get outraged.
Exactly. They think this is a moral outrage. These captains are evil. We need to enforce basic human decency.
So they try a moral intervention.
Yes, they mandate better living standards. And they actually send governing officials and doctors to ride on the ships to, oversee the captains.
Which makes sense on paper. They attempted to regulate morality.
Yeah.
But if we follow the logic of the profit motive, those captains are making an absolute fortune operating this way.
Oh, yeah.
They aren't going to just let a government official cut into their margins.
Of course not. If I am a corrupt captain, I am just going to bribe the supervising officials. I'll bribe the doctor.
And if they don't take the bribe?
Well, if there happens to be an honest official or an honest doctor who refuses the bribe, I imagine they didn't last very long on a ship full of criminals in the middle of the ocean.
They did not. The historical record shows that honest officials and doctors were simply thrown overboard.
Wow.
Or otherwise murdered by the captains. The system was so structurally flawed that introducing moral actors into it just got those moral actors killed.
That is wild.
Yeah, so the death rate stayed incredibly high. Moral preaching, regulations, oversight, it all completely failed.
Which brings us to the systemic fix. The ultimate solution. The government finally realized they couldn't preach to the captains, and they definitely couldn't outregulate them. They had to change the program.
The contract.
Yes. They changed one single line in the payment contract. Instead of paying the captains for how many convicts they boarded in England, they only paid them for the convicts that were safely delivered to Australia.
And the mechanism of action here is instantaneous. Overnight, the captain's financial survival is directly tied to the biological survival of the prisoners.
It's almost comical how fast it worked. Suddenly, the captains are actively protecting the convicts.
Right.
They are drastically improving the diets. They are cleaning the living conditions. They're the ones begging doctors to come on board and actively treat the sick.
And that 12% mortality rate plummets all the way down to 1%.
1%. I mean, that is a staggering drop.
But wait, is the author basically arguing that human morality is entirely dictated by economics? Well, what's fascinating here is the author's core thesis. If a certain state of affairs is persistently bad, relying on moral preaching is useless.
Right.
The underlying argument is that human behavior will always flow down the path of least resistance created by the program.
The system.
Exactly. You cannot ask people to act against their own systemic incentives. If the system rewards cruelty, you get cruelty. But the moment the program is changed to align incentives with the desired outcome, the chaos immediately disappears.
It is such a powerful lens. I immediately think of the modern workplace. Like you see corporations constantly complaining about a toxic culture where employees are hoarding information and backstabbing each other.
All the time.
And management brings in consultants for seminars on teamwork and core values.
Which is pure moral preaching.
Right. But then you look at their bonus structure, and it turns out they are financially incentivizing ruthless, zero-sum competition.
Yeah.
Like only the top performer gets paid, the company blames bad morals, when really they just have a bad program.
Exactly. It is a deeply pragmatic argument. But this is the exact moment where the framework takes that grounded, undeniable historical logic and begins to stretch it over modern social woes.
This is where we make the jump.
Yeah. The philosophy moves from 18th century maritime contracts to the everyday struggles of our current lives, and it begins with aging and elderly care.
Right. So if we accept that tweaking the rules is infinitely more effective than preaching at people, what happens when we apply that exact same cold logic to the most emotional parts of human existence?
It's really interesting.
It really does. The framework starts by aggressively critiquing traditional morality regarding the elderly. In many cultures, there is this massive weight placed on filial piety, the moral obligation to care for your aging parents.
But the philosophy counters that traditional expectation with a very cynical historical observation.
Quote, despite loving parents having been around since ancient times, who have seen filial children.
Exactly. The text asks us to look at reality. We have preached filial piety for thousands of years. But realistically, how many children truly provide perfect, frictionless care for their aging parents?
Very few.
Right. The argument is that relying on guilt and moral obligation is just a failing program.
And the modern alternatives we have tried, like nursing homes, relying on pensions, trying to build up a massive real estate portfolio to pay for care, these are all flawed programs too.
Because they rely entirely on individual wealth.
Exactly. If you don't have the money, the program fails you.
Yeah.
So this framework introduces an entirely new paradigm created by Lifechanyuan called the second home life mode.
And the promise here is that in this second home, a person's quality of life in their later years is completely decoupled from their personal bank account.
Or whether they have children to look after them.
Right.
And this logic is also applied to the very end of life, too. Funerals. There's a very real modern anxiety where people literally say they can't afford to die.
Which is a terrible thing to have to worry about.
It is. Because burial plots and funeral services have become astronomically expensive. It has become a bad program driven by profit.
So the proposed solution is the Lifechanyuan funeral system, which promises to remove the financial friction of death entirely, allowing people to depart gracefully and elegantly.
Okay, but I have to push back here on behalf of you, the listener, because the 18th century ship example was very concrete. We saw the math, we understood the exact contract tweak.
Sure.
But this second home program sounds great on paper, yet there is zero logistical explanation of how it actually works in the text. Like, if money doesn't matter and having kids doesn't matter, how exactly is this utopia funded?
It's a fair question.
How does the author use a concrete historical fact about boats to legitimize something that sounds like pure unfunded theory?
Well, that is actually the defining characteristic of utopian manifestos. In this kind of literature, the architecture of the belief system is the product, not the accounting spreadsheet.
I see.
You establish absolute credibility with a grounded historical fact, like the ships. You get the reader nodding along, agreeing that systemic design is way more powerful than moral pleading.
Right, because nobody can argue with the ship example.
Exactly. And once that premise is accepted, the logistics of the new world don't need to be meticulously detailed because the manifesto is selling a paradigm shift in human behavioral design.
So it's basically saying, if we can fix the nightmare of the convict ships just by redesigning the rules, imagine what we could do if we completely redesigned the rules of human society.
Precisely. And if you are truly committed to this philosophy of systematically deleting friction from human existence, well, the next logical step isn't just fixing nursing homes. You have to look at the ultimate source of human friction.
Which is our closest personal attachments. Here's where it gets really interesting, because this brings us to the nuclear family.
Yes.
The framework's view on marriage is brutally blunt. It observes that for thousands of years, very few people have actually managed marital relationships without immense pain, jealousy, and conflict.
The text essentially says the pain is too great to even list.
Right. So, in this second home mode, what is the systemic fix for marital strife? You just eliminate marital relationships entirely? No marriage equals no marital problems?
The underlying logic is startlingly linear. If marriage is the software program generating the friction, you don't try to debug it with couples therapy.
Or moral preaching about loyalty.
Right. You simply delete the program.
It's like saying, my car keeps breaking down and causing me a ton of stress, so the solution is to ban cars and just walk everywhere forever. I mean, it definitely solves the mechanic bills, but it's a drastic leap.
That is a perfect analogy. The philosophy views human emotion, specifically exclusive attachments like marriage, as inherently inefficient legacy software.
Legacy software, wow.
Yeah, it assumes that the societal expectation to pair off is just a flawed operating system we have been forced to run, and that a perfectly harmonious life requires abandoning those exclusive bonds entirely.
And it absolutely does not stop at marriage. It takes that exact same delete the buggy software approach to having and raising children.
The critique of modern parenting here is severe. The argument hinges on the idea that the vast majority of biological parents possess inherently flawed worldviews.
I mean, nobody is perfect.
Exactly. And because parents are flawed, the values and life perspectives they pass down to their children are inevitably biased, incomplete, and damaged.
Which I guess makes sense within their logic. If society is full of bad programs like greed, jealousy, and toxic competition, parents are infected by those programs. And then we just download our own viruses directly into our kids. We are infecting the next generation with our own bad programming, causing them lifelong setbacks.
Exactly. So to change the program, the framework proposes removing children from the isolated nuclear family unit. Instead, children are to be placed in a communal environment where they are nurtured and educated by what the text calls perfect teachers in their spiritual realm.
Okay, wait. How does a perfect teacher operate? Because that sounds highly subjective.
The mechanism here is standardization. By removing the biological parent.
Who has all that selfish emotional bias.
Right, the bias toward their specific child. You remove the friction of legacy traumas and individualized neuroses.
So it's totally neutral.
A communal teacher, operating within the finalized spiritual framework of this utopian society, can impart a standardized, harmonious set of values without the emotional turbulence of a traditional parent-child dynamic.
And the author claims this has been successfully practiced by Lifechanyuan for 10 years.
Yes, it supposedly frees the parents from the exhausting labor of child rearing while ensuring the kids are programmed correctly from day one.
This raises an important question, though, right? I mean, it is such a fascinating psychological pivot. It looks at the deepest, most primal human bonds. Who we choose to love, the children we bring into the world.
The core of human life.
And it identifies them as the root causes of systemic societal failure. It is the absolute extreme extension of the convict ship analogy. Like, if the captains and the convicts are fighting, change the rules. If husbands and wives are fighting, delete marriage.
If parents are messing up kids, remove the parents.
It is the design of a completely frictionless society. Every single source of emotional, financial, or interpersonal turbulence is identified as a bad program and systematically overwritten.
Which brings us to the ultimate scale of this deep dive. Because if you have wiped the hard drive clean on the family unit and you have fixed aging, where else is there to go?
You have to go macro.
You have to address the globe. The attention turns to geopolitics and the history of warfare. For thousands of years, nations have fought over borders and resources, bringing immense destruction.
And the framework asks a really simple question. Is humanity really incapable of solving this?
And the answer within this framework is that we just need to change the program. The proposed solution is total global unification.
The vision is just sweeping. Nations as a concept disappear entirely. People are allowed to move freely across the globe without restriction.
There's a surprisingly poetic phrase the philosophy uses to describe this borderless existence. It calls it you and me and you.
You and me and you. I mean, mechanically, the logic holds up perfectly. If there are no borders and there is no concept of us versus them, who is there to fight?
Nobody.
The argument is that this instantly eliminates the need for massive military budgets. Soldiers become obsolete. The destruction of war just vanishes overnight.
But the claims extend far beyond just ending war. The framework insists that by changing these foundational production and life mode programs, humanity can solve literally every problem.
Literally every problem. I have to highlight the sheer scale of the promise here for you because it lists things like social unrest, corruption, and wealth disparity. Which, okay, those are societal. But it also explicitly claims this new program will solve natural disasters.
Floods, droughts, epidemics.
Yes, it literally promises to bring about favorable weather.
Favorable weather.
I mean, how? How does changing human social organization control the weather?
Well, in utopian and spiritual manifestos of this type, there is often a deeply held belief that human disharmony and environmental disharmony are intrinsically linked.
Okay, so like a cosmic connection.
Exactly. The logic implies that when humanity is fractured by borders and greed, we abuse the earth and misallocate resources, resulting in famine and environmental collapse.
That tracks.
By centralizing human will and removing the friction of borders, we perfectly align human behavior with natural or cosmic law, resulting in total planetary harmonization, including the weather.
But you cannot have a globally harmonized utopian society without an architect. Like someone has to install this massive new operating system, and this is the climax of the framework, the reveal.
That big reveal.
It asserts that out of all the outstanding figures in human history, past and present, there is only one who possesses the wisdom to actually lead humanity into this era.
And that architect is named as Deiform Buddha of Lifechanyuan.
And to really drive home the ultimate authority of this figure, the framework includes a very specific, fascinating cultural detail. It mentions the Ziwei saint.
Yes, this is a crucial contextual anchor in the text. The framework explicitly states that even if the mythical Ziwei saint were to descend to Earth, he would be unable to surpass Deiform Buddha.
And for context, the Ziwei saint is a really profound figure in Chinese prophecy.
Right. It is this messianic legendary sage who is predicted to eventually appear and unite the world in absolute peace.
So the essay is essentially saying, you know that legendary mythical savior that ancient prophecies say will fix the world? Yeah, our architect is an upgrade over him.
It is an incredibly bold, sweeping statement to cement the authority of this new program.
If we connect this to the bigger picture and just step back and look at the entire architecture of this philosophy, it is a truly remarkable piece of ideological construction.
It really is. It begins as a highly rational, entirely secular argument about economic incentives using 18th century British maritime contracts. It establishes an undeniable truth about human nature that literally any modern economist would agree with.
And then it just smoothly, almost imperceptibly escalates. It takes that cold, pragmatic logic and applies it to your grandmother's nursing home.
Then it applies it to your marriage.
Then it applies it to who raises your children. Then to global geopolitics until finally it blossoms into a full-blown manifesto for a centralized, spiritually led, borderless, global utopia.
It is a breathtaking escalation of a single core premise.
It really is. So what does this all mean for you listening to this right now? Obviously, the leap from fixing a toxic bonus structure at your office to abolishing the concept of marriage and erasing global borders is, well, it's a massive one.
The huge leap.
But the core question introduced at the very beginning of this deep dive remains incredibly sharp and highly applicable to everyday life. Where in your own life, in your workplace, or in your friendships, are you exhausting yourself with moral preaching?
Where are you endlessly begging people to just be better?
Exactly. When what you really need to do is step back, look at the incentives driving their behavior, and simply change the program.
That is the immediately practical takeaway. But there is a deeper, much more profound philosophical question that this entire utopian vision inadvertently forces us to confront.
What's that?
Well, the ultimate solution proposed here for human suffering is to systematically eliminate every system that causes friction.
Right. Marriage causes pain. Delete the exclusivity.
Raising children causes anxiety. Outsource it to standardized communal teachers.
Nations called wars. Erase the borders. Just smooth out every single rough edge of the human experience.
Exactly. But it leaves you wondering, if we actually could execute this, if we could remove all the sources of friction, all the messy, difficult, inefficient struggle from the human operating system, do we also accidentally delete the very things that give human life its meaning, its depth, and its resilience?
Wow. That is the ultimate question. If you take away the very real chance of failing at love, or the messy, terrifying struggle of raising a child with all your own imperfections, what are you actually left with?
Is it still human life?
Exactly. It brings us right back to where we started. When you are watching that friend make the wrong choice, and you are pulling your hair out trying to guide them, maybe the friction of struggling through it together isn't a bug in the program at all.
Maybe that friction is the entire point.
I love that. We want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep questioning the programs running in the background of your own life, and we will catch you next time.